A woman from the business office came to my room on a Tuesday with a folder under her arm, and she asked me, very pleasant, whether I had any preference about the memorial service. I said, "Whose?" She checked the folder and got this look on her face, and she said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, sir, wrong room." That was how I learned there was a room in that building where people went and did not come out. 74 years old, 9 days in, and I sat on the edge of that bed with my heart going and thought, Walt, they have put you in the place where men go to be finished. And nobody asked you. Nobody so much as asked you.
Welcome to Abroad Pal. I'm Peter Walker, and this is the channel where we sit down with people who left home and built a life somewhere new. The man who opened this story is Walt Mercer, and today he is sitting right here with me. Walt, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Peter. I am glad to be here, and I am glad to tell it to somebody who wants to hear the whole thing.
I want the whole thing, so let me set you up for the folks first. I've spent years talking to Americans who walked away from the life everyone told them to want. They sold the house, boarded a plane, and started over on the far side of the world, most of them in their 70s. Meet Walt properly. Walter Mercer, 76, 38 years with his name in letters 2 feet high over a repair shop in Saginaw, Michigan. He built a business, raised a son, buried a wife, and at 74 he found out there was a room down the hall where men go to be finished, and nobody had asked him first. Walt, take me back to Saginaw. Tell me about that shop with your name on the sign, and about the son who started coming around after Ruth was gone.
My name is Walter Mercer. Most everybody calls me Walt. I am 76 now, and I grew up in Saginaw, Michigan, which was a car town when I was a boy and is mostly a memory of a car town today. My father worked at the foundry until the foundry went. I was better with an engine than I ever was with a book, so at 26 I borrowed against everything I had, and I opened a 2-bay repair shop on Genesee, and I ran that shop for 38 years. I want you to understand what that shop was, because it explains why what happened later cut the way it did. It was mine. My name was on the sign in letters 2 feet high, Mercer Auto. I hired 11 men over the years, and I never once missed a payroll. Not in the bad winters, not in '82, when half of Saginaw was out of work and men were coming to my back door asking for anything. I fixed the police chief's wife's car for free for 9 years because she was widowed young, and I never told a soul. And I am only telling you now because everyone in it is dead. I was not a rich man. I was a man people came to when a thing was broken. And in a town like that, that is a kind of standing you cannot buy. I married Ruth in 1972. She kept the books for the shop out of the kitchen at home, and she was better at the money than I ever was. And she had a way of walking into the office when I was fighting with a supplier on the phone and putting one hand flat on my chest, and I would come down off it. 46 years. We had Greg first, and then Linda 4 years after. Ruth died on a Thursday morning in the spring, the year I turned 72. Her heart. She was in the garden, and then she was gone, and there was no warning at all. No sickness, nothing to prepare a man. I came in from the shop, and the ambulance was in my driveway. I sold that shop 9 weeks later because I could not stand to open the doors on it anymore. Every one of those bays had her handwriting on a clipboard somewhere, and that is when Greg started coming around. Now, I am going to try to tell this straight because I have had 2 years and a lot of quiet mornings to think about how much of it was him and how much of it was me being a lonesome old fool who wanted his son to want him. Greg was 44 then. He had a house out past the mall and a wife named Danielle who had opinions about everything, and 2 boys I loved more than my own breath. And after his mother died, he started calling twice a week, which he had never done in his life, and coming by and sitting with me at that kitchen table. He said, "Dad, this house is too much for you alone," which was true. He said, "The money from the shop is going to get eaten up by taxes and upkeep sitting where it is," which sounded true. He said, "Come live with us, Dad." We will put in a room over the garage. You will see the boys every day. And I want you to hear me say this, plain, because I will not paint myself as a man who was tricked by a stranger. I wanted that. I wanted a room over the garage with my grandsons downstairs. After 46 years of Ruth, that house on Delaware was so quiet. In the evenings, I would leave the television on in an empty room and go sit in another one so the house would sound occupied. I sold the house on Delaware. 31 years I had lived in it, and I put the money where Greg said to put it, and about half of it went into that room over his garage, and the rest went into an account he set up because he handles that kind of thing, he said, and I signed what he put in front of me. Then a few months in, he came up with the papers for the power of attorney. He explained it while I was watching a ball game. Dad, this is only for convenience, so if you are ever in the hospital, I can talk to the doctors, so I can sign for you if you are laid up. Every family does this. Danielle's parents did it. I signed it, sitting in a recliner in my son's house with the ball game on. Took me about 11 seconds. I have thought about those 11 seconds probably 10,000 times since. That room over the garage was fine for about a year and a half. I will not tell you it was warm, because it was not. Danielle spoke to me the way you speak to a contractor who is running behind. But I had the boys. I taught the older one to change his own oil out in the driveway, and I will keep that afternoon until they put me in the ground. Then I fell. February, on their back steps, black ice, and I went down hard on my hip, and I lay in the cold for 20 minutes hollering before anybody came out. Nothing broke, which the doctor called lucky. Deep bruise, a lot of swelling, and at 74, your body does not bounce. It negotiates. They kept me in the hospital 2 nights, and on the second night, Greg came in with a woman from the discharge office, and he sat on the end of that bed, and he said, Dad, they are recommending a short rehab stay, 2 weeks, maybe 3, physical therapy, get the hip strong, then home. And the woman nodded along with him and said the word rehabilitation 4 or 5 times, and I was on the pain medication, and I was 74, and my son was sitting on the end of my bed saying 2 weeks. I said, all right, 2 weeks. They put me in a facility out on the north side of town, and I want to be fair because plenty of people who work in those places are good people working themselves half to death for nothing. But it smelled like a mop and a hot lunch, and there were men parked in wheelchairs along the wall by the nurses' station facing nothing. And on my 3rd morning, a man across the hall named Delmar hollered for his mother for 2 solid hours, and his mother had been dead since Eisenhower. I want to tell you what 5 weeks in a place like that does to a man, because people hear nursing home and they picture a bad hotel. It is the small things that do it. A woman I had never met washed me. They wrote my name on a strip of tape and stuck it to the closet door. There was a schedule on the wall for the day room, and a girl came around at 10 in the morning with a cart and asked, did I want to make a bird feeder out of a pine cone? And I said, no, thank you. And she wrote something down about me. At supper, they handed out plastic spoons because a man 3 tables over had thrown a fork in 1990-something. I ran a business for 38 years. I signed for $60,000 of parts on my name alone and slept fine that night. And there I sat at a folding table with a plastic spoon being asked about a pine cone. 2 weeks came. Nobody came to get me. I called Greg. He was busy. He would come Sunday. Sunday he did not come. 3 weeks. 4. I did the therapy, and my hip got strong enough that I was walking that hallway 40 minutes a day, and I told them so, and they wrote it in a chart, and nothing happened. 5 weeks. I called Danielle's phone once, and she did not pick up and did not call back. And then that woman came to my door with the folder and asked me about the memorial service and said the wrong room. I sat there a long time after she left, and then I got up and I walked down that hallway to the little office where they keep the phones for residents, and I called my daughter Linda in Grand Rapids, who I had not talked to in a while because she and Greg had it out after their mother died, and I had stayed out of it like a coward. And Linda picked up on the second ring, and she said, "Dad?" And there was something in how she said it. And I said, "Linda, when am I coming home?" And my daughter went quiet on that phone for what felt like a year. And then she said, the thing that took the floor out from under me and put me on a plane to the other side of the world 11 months later.
Walt, you leave us on your daughter going quiet on that phone, and I will let you get there. But I want to stop on those 11 seconds in the recliner. The power of attorney you signed with a ball game on. I have watched sharp, careful people hand a family member that same document without reading a line of it. And because the power of attorney sounds like paperwork and feels like love. It is neither. It is the keys to everything you own. So when Linda finally broke that silence, what did she tell you that put you on a plane?
She said, "Dad, the room over the garage is gone." She said Danielle had it painted in March, and the older boy moved into it, and Greg had told her back in the winter that I was in a long-term placement now, and that it was permanent, and that the doctors had recommended it. The doctors had recommended nothing. I had walked 40 minutes a day for 5 weeks. I asked her about my money, and Linda got very careful on the phone, the way you get when you have known a thing for a while and have been sick about it. She said the money from the house on Delaware had gone into an account with Greg's name on it too, and that some of it had gone into their kitchen remodel and some of it was paying the facility, and she did not know about the rest. And then she started crying on that phone, my daughter, 48 years old, crying and saying, "Dad, I should have called you. I thought you knew. He told me you knew and that you wanted this." I hung up that phone in that little office, and I stood there holding the edge of the counter because my legs had gone out from under me. 74 years old, 38 years with my name on a sign, 11 men on a payroll I never missed, and my own son had taken my house, taken my money, given my room to a teenager, and parked me in a hallway with men who holler for their dead mothers and told my daughter I had asked for it. I did not sleep for 3 nights. On the third night, I got up around 2 in the morning and I sat in the chair by the window. And that is when I met Nanita. Nanita was one of the aides. Filipina, 51 years old, and she worked the overnight because the overnight paid $1 more an hour. And she had been in this country 9 years and had 2 kids back home and a husband who had died. She came in on her rounds and found me sitting in the dark, and she did not flip the light on and start talking at me the way most of them did. She pulled the other chair over and sat down. Then she said, "You have not been eating, Mr. Walter." That was all. She sat with me for maybe 20 minutes on a shift where she had 11 other rooms to get to, and she let me talk, and I told her the whole thing, the papers, the 11 seconds in the recliner, the phone call with Linda. And when I got to the part about Greg, I could not get the words out anymore, and I put my hand over my eyes, and I cried in front of a woman I had known for 4 minutes, 74 years old, and Nanita did not tell me it was going to be all right, and she did not pat my arm and leave. She waited, and when I was done, she said something I have carried every day since. She said, "In my country, we do not do this to our old people." She said, "My mother lives with my sister, and she will die in that house with everyone in the room. And it is not a burden. Nobody in my family has ever once called it a burden." She said, "When I came here and I saw these buildings full of parents, Mr. Walter, I cried for a month. One night she was on her break and her phone rang and she waved me over to look. It was the middle of the afternoon where she comes from. And there on that little screen was her mother in a chair on a porch, 91 years old, and I counted the people around her. 9, a grandson braiding something out of palm, 2 women cooking behind her, a baby on a mat on the floor, And here is what got me. That old woman was not being visited. Nobody had driven over. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and that was the house. I said, well, that must be a nice place. And she laughed at me kind, and she said, it is a poor country. And then she said, but nobody is ever alone in it. Nobody is ever alone in it. Over the next few months, Nanita and I talked most nights she worked. She showed me her town on her phone, pictures of her mother in a chair on a porch with about 9 people around her. She told me what her cousin paid for a house. She told me what a doctor cost when you walk in and pay cash, and I made her say the number twice because I thought she had the exchange rate wrong. She had not. And a thing started turning over in my head that I had no business thinking at 74 in a wheelchair hallway in Michigan. I want to be honest about the next part because people hear the title of this and they think I climbed out a window. It was not that. I was never committed. Nobody had a court order on me. I was competent, I could walk, and I was in that building because my son put me there and because I believed him and because nobody, including me, had made a fuss. That is how most men my age end up in one. Not a locked door, a quiet assumption. I made a fuss. I called Linda back and I asked her to find me a lawyer, and she did. A woman in Saginaw who took one look at the paperwork and told me the good news and the bad news. The good news was the power of attorney could be revoked with a signature and a notary that afternoon. The bad news was that most of the house money was gone, and getting it back meant suing my own son, which would take 2 or 3 years and cost me a good chunk of whatever was left. And I was 74. I sat with that for one night. And in the morning, I told the lawyer to revoke the power of attorney, put my Social Security back into an account only I could touch, and leave the rest of it alone. I was not going to spend the last good years I had left sitting across a table from lawyers looking at my boy. He could have it. Let it be the most expensive kitchen remodel in Michigan. What I had, once the dust settled, was my Social Security. $1,890 a month after Medicare took its bite. And about $19,000 in an old account Greg had never gotten around to, which is a mercy I still do not understand. $1,890 a month in Saginaw is a 1-bedroom apartment and the light bill and nothing else. It is a man with no car in a town with no buses ordering the cheapest thing on the menu waiting to fall again. I asked Nanita a question one night in November. I said, could a man like me live where your mother lives? And she put down what she was holding and she looked at me and she said, Mr. Walter, on that money, you would live like a mayor. It took me 11 more months. I want to say that because I do not want anybody thinking I ran off on a whim. I moved out of that facility in January into a rented room, and I spent those 11 months on a library computer 3 days a week learning everything a man could learn. The visa, what it costs to see a doctor, what the rent is. I found the forums where the old Americans argue with each other about which island is better. I read until my eyes went. And Nanita wrote to her cousin's husband in Dumaguete, a man named Boyer. And he wrote back and said he would meet me at the airport and find me a place. And he would not take a peso for it. And I did not believe that part until it happened. I told Linda over coffee in Grand Rapids, my daughter who had spent the winter apologizing to me every week for a thing that was not hers. She cried again. But then she wiped her face and she said, Dad, is there any part of you that is doing this to punish him? Good question. Honest question. And I gave her the honest answer, which was maybe a little, maybe about 10% of it. And the other 90% is that I am 75 years old and I have maybe 10 good years left, and I am not spending them in a room in this state waiting for that boy to call. I did not tell Greg, not a word. I have not spoken to my son since the morning I signed the revocation. He found out I left the country from Linda weeks after. I sold what little I had left, which took about an afternoon. I flew out of Detroit on a Tuesday in October with 2 suitcases, 75 years old, having never once in my life been outside the United States except 2 days in Windsor, Ontario in 1979. 31 hours with the layovers. Somewhere over the Pacific in the middle of the night, I got a shaking in my hands that would not stop. And I sat there in the dark with everyone asleep around me thinking, Walt, you are a fool. You are an old fool who let a woman on a night shift talk him onto the far side of the earth. And then we came down through the clouds into Manila, and there was water and green and roofs going on forever, and I put my hand flat on the window like a kid. I had no idea that in 4 days a total stranger was going to do something so ordinary and so small that it would knock me apart worse than anything my son ever did.
Man, you did something in there that stops most people cold. You revoked that power of attorney. You let the house money go rather than spend your last good years suing your own boy. And you got on a plane with $18.90 a month and a stranger's promise to meet you at the gate. I have watched people sit on a decision like that for a decade. Then you set us down on a runway in Manila and told us a stranger was about to hit you harder than Greg did, with something small. Walt, what happened in those first 4 days on the ground?
Boyer was standing at the rail outside the little airport in Dumaguete, holding a piece of cardboard with Mercer on it. He is a small man about 60 with a mustache and a tricycle he has driven for 22 years. And he took both my suitcases before I could stop him. And when I tried to argue, he gave me a look I have since learned means an old man will not carry a bag while I am standing here. He had found me a place, a little concrete house in Bantayan, which is a neighborhood in Dumaguete about 10 minutes walk from the water, with a tiled floor and a porch across the front and a mango tree in the yard. I am sitting on that porch right now. Let me give you the numbers because the numbers are what got me on the plane, and I know some of you came for them. The house is 13,000 pesos a month. In real money, that is about $230. A whole house. Electric runs me $50, $60 when I use the air conditioner in the bedroom at night, and I use it. At my age, the heat is not a joke. Water is a few dollars. Internet is $30, and it is faster than what I had in Michigan, which still makes me laugh. Call the roof and the lights and the connection, $320 a month. Food. There is a place 2 lanes over, a carinderia, where a woman lifts the lids off a row of pots and you point. Rice and 2 dishes runs $1.50. The fish comes in off the boats in the morning, and I buy 1 whole for a couple dollars. I eat out most days, and my food runs $350 a month, and I eat better than I've eaten since Ruth died. A woman named Lita comes twice a week and cleans and does my washing, and I pay her well above the going rate and a bonus at Christmas, and that runs me about $60 a month. My blood pressure pills and the one for the heart, $22 at the pharmacy, and those same 2 were $110 a month back home with the insurance. Added up, and I am living well, not scraping, under $1,000 a month. My 1890 comes in on the 3rd Wednesday, which means that at 76 years old, after my son took my house and my savings, I am putting money away every single month for the first time in 15 years. But I did not come here for the money, and the money is not what keeps me here. And I want to tell you about the 4th day. Boyer took me to the public market to show me how it works, and I was tired and hot and out of my depth, and there was a crowd, and an old woman selling bananas at the corner stall looked up and saw me standing there. And she got up off her stool, and she came around the front of her own table, and she took my hand, and she put the back of my hand against her forehead. I did not know what was happening. I pulled back a little, and Boyer laughed and told me it is called mano. It is what a younger person does to an elder here. They take your hand and touch it to their forehead as a blessing. She was maybe 65. She had decided I was older than her, and that is all it took. Stranger. A woman who had nothing, selling bananas in the heat, took my hand and touched it to her forehead because I was an old man walking by. I got about 11 steps past that stall before I had to stop and hold on to a post. Boyet came back and stood next to me and did not say anything, because 10 months before that, in a building in Michigan, my own son had taken my name off a house and put me in a hallway and stopped answering his phone. And a woman in a market who did not know me from Adam, and never would, made a small gesture with my hand that said, "You are old, and that means you are worth something." I have been asked by people back home what the big difference is out here. That is the difference. That, right there. I have never in 2 years been able to say it better than that old woman said it without a word of English. The old are not a problem to be managed here. They are the top of the house. Kids give up their seat on the jeepney for me every single time, without a beat, without looking around to see if anyone noticed. When I go into the Sari Sari store, the little shop on the corner, the teenagers who are hanging around out front straighten up and say, "Good afternoon, Lolo." Lolo means grandfather. Half this neighborhood calls me Lolo Walt, and about a third of them are not sure of my real name, and it does not matter one bit. My days have a shape now. I am up around 5:30 because the roosters here do not honor any schedule known to man, and you stop fighting it after the first month. I make coffee, the local stuff they grow up in the hills, and I sit on this porch and watch the lane wake up. The kids in their white and blue uniforms going by to school, the woman across the way sweeping her step. Boyer honks, going past on the tricycle every morning around 7, and I lift my hand. I walk down to the market for whatever is fresh. My fish woman is named Delia, and she saves me the good ones and gives me grief about my Visayan, which after 2 years is still terrible. And they love it, that it is terrible. They love that an old white man is trying. I have learned about 40 words, and every single one of them cost me my dignity in public at least once. Something happened about 4 months in that I did not see coming, and it might be the best thing on this island after the people themselves. Boyer's tricycle started running rough, and he was worrying out loud about what the shop in town would charge him, and I asked him to bring it up the lane and let me listen to it. He looked at me the way you look at a grandfather who says he can fix the television. He brought it anyway. I had it running clean in about 40 minutes. A dirty carburetor and a fuel line somebody had roded against the frame where it had been chafing for a year. He told one man, that is all it takes on a lane like this. Inside of a month there was a motorbike parked outside my gate most mornings, and some young fellow standing beside it looking hopeful. I do not charge them. I told them I would take a mango or a plate of something and nothing else, and now I have more mangoes than a man can eat. And the women on this lane feed me like I am recovering from surgery. 38 years, I was the man people came to when a thing was broken. Then I sold the shop, and I was a man in a room over a garage, and then I was a man in a hallway with a plastic spoon. I did not understand until a tricycle came up my lane how much of me had gone out the door with that sign. I am 76 years old, and I have grease under my nails again and boys who come looking for me by name. Ruth would have laughed herself sick. She would have said, "Walter, you could not stay out of a bay for 2 years." In the afternoon, when the heat means business, I lie down under the fan for an hour. In the evening, I walk down to the Rizal Boulevard, which is the long seawall road along the water, and the whole city comes out to walk it at sunset. Families, students, old couples, vendors grilling bananas on little carts. I sit on the wall with a cold drink and watch the boats come in from Cebu. Somewhere down every lane in this country, somebody has a karaoke machine going, and some fellow is committing violence on a Frank Sinatra song at full volume. And that would have driven me out of my mind in Saginaw. And here, it makes me grin every time. There is a group of us that has coffee most mornings at a place near the boulevard. An Australian, a German who has been here 20 years and has never explained what he did before. a retired school teacher from England, and me. We solve every problem in the world and none of our own. And every so often, when it is down to two of you and the coffee has gone cold, the true things come out. The Englishman has not spoken to his daughter in 6 years. We all left something behind. Nobody leads with it. I will tell you about a man named Curtis, because I promised you the honest version. He came out about a month after I did, from Arizona, 71 years old, and he had the same numbers I had, and a better plan than mine on paper. He lasted 7 months. He never learned one word of the language. He ate at the same Western place every night and complained about the traffic and the paperwork and how nobody here is ever on time. And he could not work out why the lane never folded him in the way it folded me in. The answer was sitting in front of him the whole time. He waited to be gone to. He never once went to anybody. He is back in Arizona now in an apartment near his sister, and I think about him more than I let on. This place hands you exactly what you carry into it. It handed me everything, and I think that is because I got off that plane with nothing left worth protecting. 2 years in, I had it good, and I knew it, and I was almost easy in my mind. And then, one night in June, I woke up at 3 in the morning, burning up and shaking so hard the bed frame was knocking against the wall, alone in a concrete house 8,000 miles from anybody who shared my last name. And what happened over the next 4 days is the reason I will die on this island.
You walked us through the whole shape of it. The porch, the mango tree, the old woman who touched your hand to her forehead, a lane full of people calling you Lolo Walt. And then you set us down at 3 in the morning, burning up and shaking alone in a concrete house. That fear, getting sick so far from your kids, keeps more people your age stuck at home than any dollar figure I could put on a screen. So I have to ask you straight, Walt. That night the fever hit, what happened next?
Dengue, the mosquito fever. At my age and with my heart, it is not a small thing, and I did not know what it was. I only knew I could not keep water down, and my bones felt like they were trying to leave my body. I got to my phone and I called Boyer. It was 3:10 in the morning. He did not ask me a single question. He said, "Do not lock the door," and he hung up. He was at my gate in 9 minutes on that tricycle in the rain with his wife Merle in the back. They got me down to the hospital in Dumaguete, and Boyer filled out the forms I could not read, and Merle held the bowl. And then they did a thing that I did not understand for the first day and a half. They did not leave. In that hospital, the family stays. The nurses do the medicine and the family does everything else, the feeding, the washing, the sitting up all night. That is how it works there, and everyone knows it and nobody thinks it's strange. And I had no family on that island. Boyer and Merle worked out a rotation between themselves without ever discussing it in front of me. He took the nights. She took the days. Merle closed her little store for 4 days. 4 days of income she did not have to spare, and sat in a plastic chair beside my bed, spooning rice porridge into me, one careful spoon at a time, because my hands were shaking too hard to hold the spoon. On the third night, my fever broke around 2 in the morning, and I woke up, and Boyer was asleep, sitting straight up in that plastic chair with his arms crossed and his chin down on his chest. A man who drives a tricycle for a living. Every hour he sat there was an hour he was not earning. He had known me 22 months, and I lay there in the dark, and I thought about a Tuesday in Michigan and a woman with a folder asking me about a memorial service in a building my son put me in and never once came to visit. And I put my hands over my face in that hospital bed, and I wept, loud enough that Boyer woke up. And he came over and he put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, "Lolo Walt, it is okay. The fever is broken, you are okay." He thought I was crying about the fever. I was not crying about the fever, the whole thing. 4 days, the drips, the blood work every few hours, The doctor who sat on the edge of the bed and explained it in plain English and gave me her own cell phone number came to a little under $600. I paid it out of the account with the $19,000 in it, and I walked out of there on my own legs. That same 4 days in an American hospital would have started a number I could not have paid in what is left of my life. I called Linda when I got home, and I told her all of it. The tricycle at 3 in the morning, Merle closing her store, Boyer asleep in the chair, and my daughter said, "I am coming." And this time she did. She came in September and stayed 9 days, and I watched this island go to work on her the same way it went to work on me. She sat on this porch and watched Boyette honk going past every morning at 7. She watched Delia at the market press an extra fish into my hands and wave off the money. She came with me to coffee, and the Australian told her embarrassing things about me inside of 10 minutes. On her 4th day, we were walking near the boulevard, and a boy of about 9 took my hand and did the mono, the forehead thing, and kept running. And I turned around, and my daughter had stopped dead in the street with her hand over her mouth. That night on this porch, Linda said the thing I will carry to my grave. She said, "Dad, I've been so angry at Greg for 2 years, and I've been angry at myself, and I came here to see the damage he did to you. And you are the most looked after I have ever seen you in my life." She said, "I did not know that was still possible for you." I thought that part was over. I asked her about her brother once, on her last night. She said, "He does not bring me up. 2 boys of his own, and he does not bring his father up." I'm going to say one thing about Greg, and then I am done with him, because a man cannot carry that up a hill every day at 76. I do not hate my son. I raised him. Whatever went wrong in him, some of that is mine. And I have had 2 years of quiet mornings to sit with that, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. But he did a thing to me that I did not think a child could do to a parent. And then he told his sister I asked for it. And I have not found the door in myself yet that opens onto forgiving that. Maybe I will. I am not there. I think about Ruth on this porch more than I did in Michigan. And that surprised me. Back there she was in the house. She was in her handwriting on the clipboards in the shop, and in the chair she sat in, and in the garden she died in. And being around all of it was like pressing on a bruise every day. Here, there is nothing of hers, not one object. And what I have found out at 76 is that a man can carry his wife better in a place she never set foot in. I talk to her out here in the mornings. I tell her what the fish cost. She would have loved this lane. She would have had every one of these people named inside a week and been feeding them inside of 2. Now let me tell you the hard parts of this life, because a story with no hard parts in it is a sales pitch, and you can always smell one. The heat in April and May will beat you. It sits on you, and you surrender and do nothing until 4 in the afternoon. The power goes out, they call it a brownout, and you sit in the dark and sweat and wait it out. The paperwork to stay here legal is its own particular misery. A whole day in an office to be told, "Come back tomorrow with 1 more photocopy." And I have been told, "Come back tomorrow" more times than I can count. For anything truly serious, I would be on a plane to Cebu or Manila, and I know it. And I keep money set aside for that day. And there is a loneliness out here that does not fully lift. I am always going to be the foreigner. At a fiesta, when the whole lane is singing some song they have known since they were 3, there is a gap, and I feel it, and I would be lying to leave it out. I miss the fall. I miss maple trees going red. I miss my grandsons, and that is the one that gets me at 4 in the morning, because they are 14 and 11 now, and I do not know what their voices sound like anymore. But I had that gap in Michigan too. I had it worse there, because there I was supposed to fit and did not, and the not fitting felt like it was my own failing. Here, the gap makes sense. And around the gap, these people pulled me in closer than my own blood ever did. Last month it was my birthday. 76. I did not tell anybody because I am not built for a fuss, and Lita let on like she had forgotten, which should have warned me, because that woman forgets nothing. I came up the lane from the market and my little house was full. Boyette and Merle, Lita and her husband and the kids, Delia from the fish stall, closed up early. The Australian and the Englishman. The teenagers from in front of the Sorry Sorry store who call me Lolo. Somebody had made kare kare, an oxtail stew, because somewhere along the line they had worked out that it had become my favorite. 20-odd people in a small concrete house in a country I could not have found on a map 3 years ago. Not one of them owed me a thing. I stood in my own doorway with a bag of fish in my hand, and I could not make my legs carry me over the step. I was thinking about the hallway, the men in the wheelchairs facing nothing, Delmar hollering for his mother, the woman with the folder asking me about the memorial service, and that being the closest thing to a visitor I had that whole month. That is where my son decided I should finish, and I looked at this loud, warm, crowded little room, and the bag of fish went right out of my hand onto the floor, and I stood in my own doorway at 76 years old and cried in front of every one of them, and not one person looked away. Merle came and put her arm around my back and walked me in, the way you walk in an old man, and somebody put a plate in my hands. My son tried to get rid of me. I want to say it that plain one time because for a long while I could not say it out loud without my voice going. He took the house I raised him in, and he took the money my wife kept the books for, and he put me in a hallway to be finished, and he told my daughter I asked for it. And what he did not know, what he could not have known, is that on the overnight shift in that same building, there was a woman from a poor country making $12 an hour who sat down in the dark with me and told me that where she comes from, nobody is ever alone. She was right. I have been alone in a house on Delaware Street with the television on in an empty room. I have been alone in a hallway in Michigan with my own name on the door. I have not been alone one single day since I got off that plane. I am 76. My hip aches when it rains, and my heart needs watching, and I do not know how many years are left in this. But there is a rocking chair on this porch, and a mango tree in that yard, and a man on a tricycle who honks every morning at 7. And when I go, this lane will fill up the same as it did on my birthday. They tried to get rid of me. They did not know they were setting me free.
Walt Mercer spent 74 years believing his place was wherever other people decided to put him. And it took a son signing him into a hallway to show how dangerous that belief had become. The move that saved him was not the flight to Dumaguete. It was the afternoon he called a lawyer, revoked that power of attorney, and put his Social Security back in an account only he could touch. The Philippines gave him the life. That one signature gave him back the wheel. My job on this channel is to be straight with you. So let me be. Walt got a great deal right. And he got hurt in a place you can guard against. He signed a power of attorney in 11 seconds with a ball game on, and his son used it to move a house, a savings account, and a father. If you take one thing from Walt tonight, take this. A power of attorney hands another person the keys to everything you own. Read it, limit what it covers, name someone you would trust with your life, and put it in front of a lawyer who works for you and not for the relative holding the pen. He got the recovery right, and I want you to steal it. He did not sell the fear. He did not chase revenge through 3 years of court, and he did not move on a whim. He spent 11 months on a library computer learning the visa and the costs, and he had Nanita, and through her, Boyet, a man on the ground who met him at the airport with a sign. That person matters more than any bank balance. Before you price a single flight, find your Boyet. I will name the risk too, because Walt would want it named. He flew one way at 75 with a heart that needed watching. And dengue found him in a house 8,000 miles from his kids. It came out right because a tricycle driver he had known 22 months slept upright in a plastic chair beside his bed. Luck carried part of that. Get your heart looked at before you fly. Keep money set aside for a flight to a bigger hospital in Cebu or Manila. And know where the good one sits before you need it at 3 in the morning. Walt did the hardest sum a person can do. A room that fills up against a room that empties out. He landed on the right answer, and it cost him a house, a savings account, and a son to get there. Most of us have more room to change the ending than we let ourselves believe, and less time to do it than we think. I'm Peter Walker. If this helped, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.